Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Debrief on ABC News Live. I'm Kimberly Brooks. Thanks so much for joining us. We have team coverage to talk about the escalating tensions in Iran. Plus, your phones may be messing up your bones, but don't worry, we'll explain. And we're talking about the name that everyone is saying after the NBA draft, Zion Williamson. But first, here are your headlines.
The U.S. is out with its annual report on human trafficking. The usual suspects, China, North Korea, as are a couple of new players.
The U.S. government has added Saudi Arabia and Cuba to its blacklist for human trafficking in its annual report. The Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, saying both governments have not done enough to combat the exploitation of people into forced labor or sex work.
If you don't stand up to trafficking, America will stand up to you.
Pompeo saying combating trafficking is a top priority for the administration.
There are 25 million adults and children suffering from labor and sex trafficking all over the world, including in the United States.
Critics, though, have chided the administration over their decision to dramatically decrease the number of humanitarian visas for trafficking victims.
More protests in Hong Kong today over a controversial proposal to allow extraditions to mainland China. The bill is on hold, but protesters want it scrapped completely.
No justice!
This morning, the Philadelphia Police Department under fire. Protests breaking out as 72 officers are taken off the streets, part of a social media scandal rocking 8 U.S. cities. The advocacy group Plainview Project compiling more than 5,000 racist and offensive Facebook posts allegedly made by 3,500 current and former officers nationwide.
It makes me sick, to be honest with you. It really makes me sick because we are in a position to know better.
Time to restart them up. The Rolling Stones kicking off that postponed tour tonight in Chicago. The No Filter tour was supposed to launch back in April, but was delayed so that frontman Mick Jagger could undergo heart surgery.
We begin in the Middle East, tensions between the U.S. and Iran reaching a flashpoint. Sources tell ABC News President Trump ordered a military strike on Iran before reversing his decision. This comes after Iran shot down a U.S. drone in the Gulf of Oman. So where do we stand now? We have team coverage on this crisis. I want to bring in James Longman in the UAE. We have Matt Gutman on the ground in Israel, and we have Terry Moran in our D.C. bureau. James, I want to start with you. What exactly do we know about President Trump's reversal?
Well, not very much, to be honest, Kimberly. It came in the sort of small hours yesterday, local time here, and we understand basically that ships were in the water near where I am here, planes are in the air, and Donald Trump made the decision to reverse these strikes. He was tweeting just a short time ago about why, and he said basically it was because he was told at the last minute that 150 people would have died as a result, and so he decided to change tack. The White House, though, has said that the military option does remain on the table, and so a lot of people here in the region are just holding their breath, waiting to see what happens next. I think most people here did expect some kind of reaction, certainly in the region, to an Iranian decision to take out a US drone, and I think tonight people are still waiting to see what happens. But it's certain that a lot of, for instance, I think UAE authorities here, the Saudis, other countries in the region certainly do not want things to escalate because they know what the Iranians can do. They certainly can't go toe-to-toe with a US military, but they can certainly ignite or activate their proxies across this region in places like Yemen, not far from where we are here, in the Palestinian territories, not far from where Mat is, where Islamic Jihad and Hamas are funded by the Iranians, in places like Iraq, where we've seen continued attacks against Sunni and American installations there in that country by Iranian militia. So a lot of people hoping that this doesn't escalate, but not really knowing where things are going to go next.
And Terry, do you think that we would even be in this situation right now if President Trump didn't pull out of the nuclear deal?
No, that's it. Of course, you may get a different argument from President Trump and his supporters, but there's no question that the Iranian problem, which is a genuine strategic problem in the Middle East, it is a malign actor in many of the countries that James just mentioned, sponsoring terrorism, trying to destabilize governments, even waging proxy war in Yemen. that was basically, there was a lid on that to some extent because of the Iran deal. President Trump tore it up. He didn't think it was a good one. He thinks he can get a better one. But one is hard-pressed to see why Iran would negotiate right now. Look, this is a crisis of credibility that now stretches across two presidents in the Middle East. First, President Barack Obama blinked when he drew his own red line about using chemical weapons in Syria, threatened military action, back down to get inspectors in instead. That was seen as weakness in the Middle East. Now, President Trump actually pulls back after giving the green light and go order for an American attack in Iran. There's no question there's a vacuum of power developing in the Middle East as the United States, exhausted with its wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, decides, you know, we've had enough of that. I think that's the big strategic issue right now. As far as President Trump is concerned, he has brought this because of his withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal and his laying on of more sanctions on Iran. He's brought this conflict to a sharp point, and now we have to see where it goes.
Yes, and Matt, you're in Israel, a region that has a ton of U.S. troops. If the U.S. and Iran did, in fact, go to war, the devastation would potentially be felt in a region like Israel first, right?
Probably. I mean, you know, James mentioned the proxies, and that is obviously something that Israel and the United States, and of course Iran, are keenly aware of, right? It's very hard to hit the United States from Iran, so what do? You hit the United States allies. And also Israel, more than any other country, has been more vocal about stopping the Iranian nuclear threat or possible capabilities. It has been a vocal supporter of U.S. retaliation or attacks against Iran, and so in many ways it is the likely target. Now, I can break that down a little bit more. In Gaza, there's a very strong Hamas element. It is supported by Iran to some degree. They could launch missile and rocket strikes on cities like Tel Aviv, really Israel's heartland. In the north of Israel, Hezbollah, the Shiite militia, which is probably one of the most potent military forces in the entire Middle East, and obviously politically powerful in Lebanon. It has enormous weaponry and capacity, especially with missiles. All of those are trained on Israel's heartland as well. And there are also Iranian forces in Syria who could do some damage. They're based in airports and air bases there. So Israel is surrounded by a lot of these other forces. And if there is some sort of hot war between the United States and Iran, Israel would be a likely target. But, Kimberly, Hamas is tired. Hezbollah knows that any sort of major conflagration could end up with it being wiped out or having massive casualties on its end. And Iran has been struck by Israel in Syria as well. So everybody knows that there are very high stakes here. And the more powerful the strikes against Israel in a possible conflagration, the harder Israel will strike back, which obviously deals with a possible sweeping conflagration in the Middle East. All of these powers getting together, and I think right now we're getting the idea that nobody really wants that to happen right now.
Terry, you've covered a number of these situations before. In your opinion, from what you see, where do you imagine we will go from here?
Well, I think the United States is temporarily standing back from this conflict. That is the president's directive right now. He pulled those ships and planes back, and that is clearly an acknowledgement that it's one thing to bomb Syria, which he has. Syria can't hit back. Iran can. He doesn't want that. He didn't believe that this response was proportionate. So right now, Iran has the whip hand, it seems to me. They have demonstrated with a weak hand how they can play it, gradually escalating up pressure, right? Hitting the oil tankers and now bringing down an American drone and demonstrating that if they get sanctioned, they have ways of responding in a way that has stymied this president. So right now, I'd look how the president can get out of this bind without surrendering, essentially, to Iran's act of aggression is a very difficult presidential problem.
All right, I want to thank you guys for joining us. James Longman, Matt Gutman, and Terry Moran, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And guys, we move on to former Vice President Joe Biden, who's in South Carolina, along with a bunch of other candidates at Congressman Jim Clyburn's famous fish fry this weekend. Representative Clyburn is one of many black lawmakers defending Biden after his latest controversy. This time, Joe Biden made comments saying he could get things done in the Senate and referenced work he did in the past with two Southern congressmen who supported segregation, saying that they never called him boy, only called him son. It didn't go over well. So I want to bring in Avery Harper, who is down in South Carolina. Avery, obviously, Biden in hot water here. He was called out by many people, including Senator Cory Booker. Can you tell us about the phone call that they had?
Well, the Biden campaign isn't confirming the tone of that phone call, but Booker, he went on to MSNBC last night and he spoke about what he described as a 15 to 20-minute phone call with former Vice President Joe Biden, in which he was able to explain the racist connotations of the word boy. He came away from the conversation saying that he felt absolutely better about that incident about Vice President Joe Biden, and that he was able to get an apology from him. So that is what we're hearing from Senator Booker at this point.
Yeah, and Avery, South Carolina has a racist past, but it also has a lot of black voters. Do you think they will see this as an incident taken out of context, or see it as a candidate who is out of touch?
Well, I think you have to look at the black establishment. You're talking about the Democratic establishment, the backbone of the party that's here in the state. Joe Biden has very deep ties to South Carolina. He's been here for many years. He has a very significant influence here. And so a lot of the folks that I've been talking to say that, hey, they didn't like the comments. They hope that the vice president clarifies those comments, but they don't think that there was any malice behind it. I was able to speak with Jamie Harris, and he's the former chair of the Democratic Party here in South Carolina. And that's what he told me. He said that people here in South Carolina love Joe Biden, but you know, he hopes that he clarifies those comments.
And I just want you to tell us about the event, because obviously you're down there. The fish fry is happening. Why is this such a big deal?
Well, there's going to be thousands of people who will be at this event. It's free. It's open to the public. It's a chance for ordinary South Carolina voters to come in contact, get very up close and personal with all of the candidates, 22. All but one will be speaking at the event tonight. It's supposed to be a lot of fun, music, food, open bar. And so it's a chance for all of these voters to be introduced to some of these folks who have been to South Carolina. Some people have been campaigning heavily here. When you look at Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, but there's other people who are just getting their feet wet here when you look at a person like Pete Buttigieg. So it is an opportunity for all of these candidates to really, you know, make a good first impression, not only on voters, but on the Democratic establishment here in the state.
All right, Avery Harper down there in South Carolina, thanks for joining us today. And early this morning, a fire and then multiple explosions at a 150-year-old oil refinery in Philadelphia. So I want to go to Whit Johnson, who's on the ground there with more details. Whit, what do we know about this so far? What happened exactly?
Well, Kimberly, we do have some updates for you, but first I want to show you the scene here at the command post. You can see this emergency response, all of the different fire trucks and agencies that all came to respond to this emergency here. The new information we have now is that the fire crews say is contained, but it's not completely out. Philadelphia Energy Solutions, which operates the facility here, says that they are operating, but at a limited capacity while they try to put out those remaining hot spots. There was an evacuation order, I should say a shelter-in-place order, just to clarify, that went out to the immediate homes and businesses in the area. That has since been lifted. The air quality has been tested and determined to be okay. So fire crews saying no immediate danger to the people who are in this neighborhood. But all of this breaking out in a series of massive explosions around 4 a.m. People could feel those concussions as far away as South New Jersey. People say that artwork was actually knocked blocked off of their walls and debris sort of raining in the area. You can see some of the incredible video that viewers have sent in. People who are around could see those explosions one after another. As far as the cause of this fire, crews say that there was an ignition in one of the butane tanks at the facility, but it's still unclear what started the fire, so they're still investigating the cause as far as we know right now. Now, this is a massive, sprawling refinery here. Philadelphia Energy Solutions says it's the biggest refinery on the East Coast, processing some 335,000 barrels of crude oil per day. At this time, it's still unclear what, if any, impact that could have on supply in the region.
All right, Whit, crazy to see the footage of that fire. Thank you for the updates. Happy that no one was injured. Thank you so much. So I have a question for all of you that are watching right now. How long have you been on your phone today? Better yet, how long have you been on your phone this week with your head tilted down scrolling? I know a lot of people talk about the dangers of screen time for your eyes and your mental health, but get this, apparently our phones are also affecting our bones. So I want to bring in Dr. Heidi Choi from Mount Sinai. You're in rehabilitation medicine, and I want you to help us understand these neck spurs, as they call them. What is this? What's happening to our bodies?
Thank you so much for having me here. In our specialty, our main goal and focus is to help our patients improve their function and their quality of life. So this is very near and dear to us. I'm sorry, what was the question?
So there's these neck spurs that everyone's talking about that we're getting from looking at our phones. How do we even know that this is there? Who found this out?
So there's been a lot of attention on this news, on this study based in Australia. So this was a recent study. They studied 1,200 people, and they found that 33% of adults had bone spurs. So I guess most people probably don't know what these bone spurs are. There's different types of bone spurs. Some happen where bone meets bone, and these are called joints. And the type that they studied is where the muscles attach to the bone. So I brought a model with me.
I'm so happy you brought the model. I love the models.
Yeah, so if you can see, these are the neck bones, and this is the back of the skull. And where they looked at the bone spurs was where the muscles attach right here, and this is where they found spurs almost as big as about an inch.
Wow. That's where we're like bending, we're actually bending our heads down for hours at a time.
Right. And when we bend our heads, that detracts from the normal anatomy of the neck. The way we're built to hold our bodies is straight.
Right.
We call this a neutral position. So when we're bending over like this, hunched over, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of tension on the neck. It creates a lot of headaches, neck pain. Over time, chronically over years, you can have this abnormal bony development, and this is what they're seeing.
Yes. So how do you know that you should get checked for this? Is it because you start feeling a lot of pain and then you go in and they tell you that's what you have? Or should we just all assume that we have these spurs?
No, not everybody has these spurs. What's important to know is that sometimes you can have these spurs that are found on imaging, like x-rays or CAT scans, and sometimes these people don't even have any symptoms. They might not have pain. Other times you have a lot of pain and you get an image, you get an x-ray, and there's nothing there. So it really depends, and it's really important for you to, if you have a lot of pain, then you see your physician, and together with your symptoms and with the imaging, they'll come up with the right diagnosis for the right treatment.
Yes.
And if you don't have pain, don't worry about these bone spurs.
I mean, the treatment sort of sounds like you put your phone down a little bit more, right?
Exactly.
Would that help?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is that they kind of bring attention to this. You know, a lot of people, young people, we're on our smartphones all day, and this is an unnatural position, like I said. And I think that it's really great that they're bringing attention to this because now that we know all this unnatural behavior is actually causing bony changes in our spines.
Wow.
And on our skulls. So I think it's very important what we can do to make sure that this doesn't impact us down the line is I think it's very important to check in with yourself.
We got to check in.
Check in with yourself. I'm guilty of this myself. When I'm on the computer, on the phone, I do this and I forget, and then I'm like, oh, gotta remember. You gotta
Everyone has to remember. You gotta remember.
Gotta remember. You gotta straighten up. And doing these brief little check-ins, you know, where you focus on your breathing, your posture, it can decrease stress over your day.
Well,
It takes
Heidi,
just a couple seconds.
Heidi, this kind of is alarming, but I'm glad to know that it doesn't sound super serious. But I appreciate you coming, guys. Pay attention. This drives it home. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So guys, we're moving on. Last night was the NBA draft right here in New York at Barclays Center. And if you didn't know his name before, you definitely know it now. Zion Williamson. Take a look at him last night taking all of this action in.
My mom sacrificed a lot for me. I wouldn't be here without my mom. She did everything for me. I just want to thank her.
Your mom was your coach when you were coming up. She coached you until you were 14. What are the sacrifices you feel as though she made for you?
She put her dreams aside for mine. She always looked out for the family first before herself.
That makes me so incredibly emotional. I want to bring in ESPN's Malika Andrews to talk about this. Malika, watching that video is so incredibly beautiful. Can you just talk about the person he is? He's so humble.
Yeah, I mean, Kimberly, what you saw there is what was so impressive to the Pelicans, the New Orleans Pelicans organization, and that's where I am now in New Orleans. And all last night, I was at the press conference where the president of basketball operations, David Griffin, was talking about Zion, and he just said, you know what, we are so impressed with his basketball skills, because understand, this is a guy who's compared to a young LeBron James. He is a once-in-a-generation talent, but they are even more impressed with the kid that he is, the person that he is, his humbleness, he's down to earth, the fact that he is willing to, one, put a franchise on his back, but also learn from the guys who are already here. And so they're really excited to have someone like Zion. And David Griffin actually teared up when he saw that video too. So you're not the only one whose heartstrings were tugged on a little bit.
Yeah, and just again, like, how big is this for New Orleans, this city? I mean, this is huge.
Yeah. It's almost hard to categorize just how big this is for New Orleans. I mean, this isn't necessarily the biggest basketball city. It is Saints Nation down here. This is a big NFL town. But up and down I-10, there are signs that say, "Welcome home, Zion." The entire city is excited. 2,000 plus people showed up in downtown New Orleans last night at a watch party. This has the potential to really shift their franchise and make them go from a small market team to a nationally recognized brand. So this is huge. This is seismic for New Orleans.
Well, we're definitely excited for him, and I wish I could tell his mother congratulations in person too. She's amazing. But Malika, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone's going to be watching Zion, so this is great. Thank you. And an interesting story as we continue to cover Pride Month. A Catholic high school in Indiana can no longer call itself Catholic. The Archdiocese of Indianapolis stripped a Jesuit preparatory school of its Catholic status after its administration refused to fire a gay teacher. Archbishop Charles Thompson said in a decree issued today that all ministers in their professional and private lives must convey and be supportive of Catholic Church teaching. The Archdiocese of Indianapolis recognizes all teachers, guidance counselors, and administrators as ministers. The school's Board of Trustees say they sincerely disagree with the Archdiocese and decline to fire the highly capable and qualified teacher who happens to be in a same-sex marriage. And guys, we're going to have plenty more coverage of Pride Month coming up, including a special, so take a look.
Sunday, June 30th.
Celebrate love.
Celebrate life.
Celebrate history.
Celebrate pride.
Extraordinary access, incredible stories.
Celebrate.
Celebrate. Celebrate Pride. Streaming on ABC News Live, Sunday, June 30th, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern.
We can live free.
Yes, we are very excited about that, so you have to make sure you check it out. And if you're around today, make sure you stick around and check out the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. because our Devin Dwyer is speaking to the acting director of ICE. So here's a quick look at that.
This is not about fear. No one is instilling fear in anyone. This is about the rule of law and maintaining integrity of the system. We have people, including families, that have received an immense amount of due process, have received final orders from a judge. We have sent letters to some of these families, a few thousand, asking them to come into ICE and say, hey, we'll work with you. We'll give you a few weeks to get your affairs in order, and then we'll help you go back to your home country. This is about the rule of law.
All right, so again, that full interview airs today at 3:30 Eastern Time, so make sure you don't miss it. Guys, continue to take care of yourselves. It's the weekend, it's Friday, and of course, I'll see you next week.